Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to today's Play Attention webinar. My name is Gwen Sorley, and I will be your host today. I have to start today's session by simply thanking you. I thank you for making the decision to click that Zoom link and join the webinar today. I know that many of you may have struggled with that decision because you have a lot of other things on your plate. There are other things that maybe you need to attend to, and you have other meetings. But I really do appreciate you making this decision and coming to today's webinar because we are going to be talking about decision making. And not only decision making, but how ADHD can sometimes negatively impact that decision making process. Now, I want you just to take a moment and think about decisions you've had to make. And do you find that those decisions have been a struggle at times? I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago, and I was out to dinner with a few friends, and one of our friends has ADHD. And he is a personal chef. So he knows all about food. He lives for food. That is his favorite topic of conversation. And yet, when we were at the restaurant, he could not decide what to order. I know many of you probably can relate to a similar situation. And if you do relate to this, you can type comments in the chat box. I always like to have a lot of interaction during our meetings so that I can share your questions and comments with others. But do you relate to that? We are all there for dinner, and this individual who has a lot of experience with food and restaurants, he simply could not decide what to order. And we could almost see the anxiety rise in him as the waiter kept coming back over to the table to see if we were ready. And there were a couple of times where he said, "No, I'm not ready." And you could see him getting a little bit more anxious. And finally, when the waiter came over one last time, James decided what he wanted and he just blurted out what he wanted to order. And in that moment, I thought, I don't know that that's what he actually wanted. It seemed more of an impulsive decision rather than, oh, this looks great. I would really like this to have this for dinner tonight. And a lot of you are saying, Amanda's saying, yes, she can absolutely relate to that. Many of you are saying that you can relate to that situation or maybe a similar situation. And it may not be you. It may be that you see this in your friends or your partner or your children, but that's what we're going to really explore today. So, just as a quick quiz, how many decisions do you think you will make today? Go ahead and type in the chat box just an estimate. How many decisions do you think in a 24-hour period you will make? Go ahead and take a guess and type it in the chat box. Sherry says thousands. Larissa says 200. Wadi says 5. Diana says 5,000. Owen says 500. Jen says 1,000. Maya says 4. Christina says 60,000. El Marie says quite a lot. Sarah says thousands. Amanda, hundreds. Lisa is very specific. She said 86,400. Olivia says too many to count. Uh, Wadi says, I really have no idea. And Susan says too many. Barbara says many, many little decisions. And you're right. There are many, many little decisions, but they add up. The average adult makes about 35,000 decisions a day, and the average child makes 3,000 decisions a day. So, isn't that amazing? And now, most of these decisions are very small decisions, right? They're small decisions that you make throughout your day, and you make many of those decisions subconsciously. You're not even Uh, Sherry says, can I go back to being a kid? Yeah, 3,000 seems much less of a cognitive load, doesn't it? So we are making so many decisions every single day, and that may be why you feel a little bit mentally fatigued at the end of the day. You feel like you've had to make so many decisions. And if you have ADHD, imagine how much more draining that is because the decision-making process can be so challenging. So let me know if you could go ahead and type in the chat box because right now I'm on the East Coast of the United States, so it's about a little after 1 o'clock here. Many of you are in the same time zone, so most of us are halfway through our day, so we may have already made about 15,000 decisions. And some of you are here and you're from Europe, so you've made even more decisions today. So go ahead and type in the chat box. What decisions have you struggled with so far today? Give us some examples because when you're thinking about those decisions, there are so many, right? But some may be very common. You may have struggled with something very small this morning, like what size coffee should you order? Or maybe you're watching your daughter, and every single morning you go through this, she simply cannot decide what to wear to school. What are some of those decisions you've struggled with today? And they may be bigger. Maybe you're in the middle of a job change and you're looking at deciding what your next job opportunity is. Uh, so many of you have written in a lot of great answers. So Steph says, attending this webinar when stuff has come up at work. Absolutely, Steph. And I appreciate you making the right decision. You attended the webinar. Good for you. But I understand, like I said in the beginning, I understand that for many of you, this might have been a hard decision because there are other priorities. Jen says, what's for breakfast? Uh, Diana says, accepting medical documentation for a federal program for employees. That's a bigger decision. Antoinette says, should I agree with my boss or raise my concerns? Oh, that's another one that may take a little bit more time to think through. And we're going to talk about taking time to think through bigger decisions and controlling that impulsivity, Diana. So that's something to, Antoinette, sorry. That's something to keep in mind. Michael says, I massively struggled over what to make for breakfast. Then I had to rethink my decision twice as I discovered that ingredients were missing. That's a great example, Michael. Eliza says dishes, laundry, organize laundry, nap, and forget about it all while sleeping. Therefore, turn off my bedroom light or keep it on. Just go outside and be with the chickens and the cat. So you had a lot to work through. Uh, TT says, do I have time to go to the bathroom? Maureen says, format details of a presentation for today. Rachel says, whether to choose an electricity plan or put it off. Lynn, what actions to prioritize? And a lot of you are bringing up prioritization, and I'm glad you are because we're going to talk about that a little bit today as well. Evelyn, paying bills today. Sarah, booking a flight and weighing cost versus length of flight versus time of day. You all are bringing up really good points because, Sarah, we're also going to be talking about mental flexibility and being able to evaluate the pros and cons of different decisions. Y says whether to offer to change the plan agreed to with my husband and pick up our kid after all instead of him after I learned a planned conflict went away. Barbara, which way to drive to avoid traffic, what to cook. So a lot of you are going. Larissa goes back to the what to wear conflict. I stood in my closet for who knows how long, looking at a closet filled with clothes, wondering what to wear, thinking to myself, I have absolutely nothing to wear. Exactly. I think that a lot of you have gone through that. So what to wear, what to cook. Maya has that concern also. A lot of you have brought up that There's so many. I can't even go into all of them, but so many good decisions you've had to make here. And El Marie says, I am from South Africa. It is 7 p.m. I had so many things to do. I couldn't prioritize, was jumping between tasks and not getting anywhere. That illustrates, El Marie, one of the points we're going to make right off on decision making and why it's so difficult. So, indecision is not a modern day phenomenon. It's something that has challenged humanity for centuries. In fact, one of the earliest philosophical discussions on decision making was led by Jean Buridan. Now, he had a thought experiment, which is known as Buridan's donkey. And this illustrates the struggle about making a decision. So, in this scenario, there is a donkey, a hypothetical donkey, who is standing equal distance between two equally appealing bales of hay. And he is overwhelmed by the decision-making process. And because he simply cannot decide which bale of hay he should eat first, eventually Buridan's donkey dies of starvation due to his indecision. So this really does illustrate what we're talking about today. Do you ever feel like that indecisive donkey? And you can use the raise your hand icon, or I think we've illustrated from all of the decisions that you typed in the chat box. We know that many of us at times feel like that indecisive donkey. You may not be standing between two equally appealing bales of hay, but you have a decision to make. You've narrowed down that decision, and because of uh, difficulties prioritizing or information overload, you just feel overwhelmed, or maybe you're experiencing that analysis paralysis where you just simply cannot make a decision. And when we talk about indecision, this can have some negative effects. Chronic indecision, especially for individuals with ADHD, can lead to anxiety and stress. I'm sure many of you here today have experienced that, even with those little decisions. Like when we were talking about you can't decide what to wear, and the time is just ticking away, and that causes stress because now, since you can't make that seemingly simple decision, now you may be late for work. So that anxiety and stress, even over little decisions, can occur. You might just start procrastinating because you're hoping that, oh, if you just put off that decision, maybe the whole situation will just resolve itself. Helen says yes to everything in this list. And this list may resonate with you, or you may have some other side effects that you can actually type in the chat box. You may experience overwhelm or decision fatigue, like we talked about. If you're making thousands of decisions a day and that's challenging, how fatigued you might be by the end of the day. You have decreased self-esteem because you think, why does it seem everyone else can make a decision and I struggle with that? You may have missed opportunities because you do procrastinate or put off those decisions. Strained relationships, like someone mentioned, do they stay with the plan that they made with their partner earlier, or do they change the plan? So it may cause some strain in your relationships. And it also may lead to some impulsiveness as a response to pressure, kind of like what I mentioned about my friend who seemed to just in the end respond impulsively with what he wanted to order. So we really want to look at how we can improve the decision-making process so that we don't experience so many negative side effects. So today we're going to explore why decision making can be tough, particularly for individuals with ADHD. And then we're going to discuss some strategies to help you overcome this timeless challenge. Indecision may be centuries old problem, but the tools and techniques we'll discuss today can hopefully help you navigate the decision-making process with clarity and confidence. That is our goal for today. So I hope that reinforces that you made a good decision to come to today's presentation. So let's first look at the science behind ADHD and indecision. And when we talk about ADHD and indecision, we have to start with executive function. Individuals with ADHD experience impairments in executive function, and executive function plays a vital role in decision making. Now, I know that many of you here today are very familiar with executive function, but for those of you who may not be as familiar, let's just go ahead and review just quickly review what we mean by executive function. Executive function is a set of mental processes. So it is kind of like the CEO of your brain. It's what allows you to control your attention, your behaviors, your emotions. It allows you to plan and prioritize, organize, avoid procrastination, and remain on task. So it is this set of mental processes that we use every day to get things done. And it also is a set of mental processes we use in order to make solid decisions. So when you say, gosh, I really have a hard time making decisions, I don't know why. If you have ADHD and therefore you have weak executive function, we are going to look at how do these mental processes actually play a role in the decision-making process. So let's unpack the decision-making process. We're going to look at 5 steps within the process. And if you have ADHD, these 5 steps can be even more challenging. But it's important that we look at these steps because if we can really understand where challenges lie, then that understanding can help us develop strategies to overcome them. So the very first is identifying the decision to be made. And this requires attention and focus. That seems pretty basic, doesn't it? But someone brought that up, and I mentioned I was glad that they brought up the attention piece, that they were having a hard time just staying attentive long enough. And that is the very first step. You have to be able to pay attention to the entire situation so that you can identify the decision to be made and prioritize. So, if we think about how your day began, and I know that many of you can relate to this next slide, does your day start like this? You have so many little decisions or little tasks that need to be taken care of. But there are also some bigger tasks. And so all of these tasks, your day begins and you have all these tasks. Where do you begin? And Sherry says, yes, her day absolutely starts like this. So already you've started with that overwhelm, right? So now we have to be able to pay attention long enough in order to prioritize and then sustain that attention on each task so that we can complete it. Because when we talk about ADHD, attention deficit, that's really a misnomer, isn't it? No one has a complete deficit of attention. You have great attention. The problem is you're paying attention to bits and pieces of everything. So when you see all of these tasks at hand, you might be able to pay attention to your email for a little bit of time, but then your attention jumps over to your grocery list. And then your attention jumps over to that report that you're really supposed to get done for work today. And then your attention jumps over to maybe reviewing some meeting notes. And then because you feel a bit overwhelmed, you go for that dopamine hit, right? Now your attention goes to some instant gratification. So you start scrolling through your social media to get a little bit more relief. Now, you may enjoy that and it may take your attention for a moment of time, but it really wasn't the priority for the day. So it's really important we look at attention in order to not only prioritize, but to sustain our attention so that once we do prioritize, you're able to start number one in that list, sustain your attention until you complete number one, and then move on to number two and number three. And of course, things aren't always systematic. We do have to jump around at times because things happen and bigger priorities come into your day, but that's task switching, right? Not multitasking where we're trying to do too many things at one time. So that very first step is identifying the decision to be made. And the challenge when ADHD is involved, ADHD can lead to indecision at this stage where multiple small decisions are competing for your attention, making it hard to pinpoint the most important one. So that's the very first item we need to look at when we're looking at the decision-making process. Now, next is gathering relevant information. So this requires working memory. Remember when we looked at that wheel of executive function, working memory is one mental process within executive function. And many of you here maybe have gone through a neuropsych evaluation, and working memory is often one of those areas that are cited to improve. Now, you can think of working memory as kind of like your mental sticky note, right? It's where you gather information, you hold that information on your mental sticky note in order to complete a task. Okay, so let's look at this scenario. This is our student, Sarah. Maybe this is your student or your client or your daughter. And so your student, Sarah, she has finally decided, she took that first step and she made a decision that she is going to do her school report on penguins. So she starts the information gathering stage, right? She's researching. She has found out where penguins live. She has researched what they eat. And as she's researching, she's holding all of this relevant information on that mental sticky note, right? Her working memory is at work right now because she's storing all of that information in her working memory so that she can use that information to complete the task, which is to write her report. But all of a sudden, while she is gathering all of the relevant information, she sees a really cute panda video and she starts watching that panda video. And then as she's watching that panda video, she then sees a video on hippos. And then what happens next? I'm sure all of you have experienced this. What happens to her next? I'm waiting to see if you can predict what's happening next. Yes, exactly. She then sees the giraffe video and the kitten video. And Evelyn says doom scrolling. Exactly, because all of a sudden, all of these videos are taking her attention, and now she has lots of irrelevant information, right? She has gathered the relevant information, but now she's gone through this other information gathering stage where we're getting lots of irrelevant information. And now she's discovered 30 minutes later that she has so much information. She no longer remembers all of the important information. Where do penguins live? What do they eat? All of that information she was storing on her working memory is now lost because she's gone down that rabbit hole and has way too much information. So it is important that we keep in mind when we are in that information gathering stage, we have to be concerned about sustaining our attention and really focused on relevant information. For individuals with ADHD, staying focused on gathering that relevant information can be difficult. Your attention may wander, as we discussed with our Sarah student, and your working memory struggles to keep important facts in mind, causing frustration and making the task take much longer than it should. So, if any of you here, you've heard or you know that you struggle with working memory, have you ever thought about how, when you're in Google and you're doing all those Google searches and you're getting so much information, you're just getting inundated, how that negatively affects your working memory? Some of you may not have thought about that process. So it's really important to stay focused on relevant information. Now, we're also going to look at the next step, which is evaluating alternatives. And this requires cognitive flexibility. Cognitive flexibility, again, is one of those mental processes within executive function. And that's where we're looking at the pros and cons of different decisions. And in order to have cognitive flexibility, that means that you have that ability to shift perspectives and consider various outcomes. That's really important in making a solid decision. So now we can all relate to car shopping and this decision-making process, which can be super challenging for all of us. And I know it's one of those decision-making processes that I don't necessarily enjoy. Some people enjoy it, but it's not necessarily one that I enjoy because there are so many factors to keep in mind, so many pros, so many cons you have to look at. So let's say that you are trying to make a decision about what car you should purchase. And there is one car that you're looking at. You've narrowed it down to a couple. One of those cars is really fuel efficient. So you're excited about that because you think that this fuel efficiency is really going to save you some money down the road. So that really interests you. You're interested in that car because of that. But that car, even though it's very fuel efficient, it isn't quite as comfortable and it doesn't have a lot of technical features. It doesn't have a lot of the latest technology. So those are some of the cons. Now, the other car that you're looking at is very comfortable. It's less eco-friendly, but it's very comfortable and it has all of the latest and greatest technology and gadgets. So it has all the latest technology for safety and for additional features that you enjoy. So you start looking at the different cars, but suddenly you find that you are fixated on fuel efficiency. You become so hyper focused on that one specific feature, I should say, right? That fuel efficiency. And this goes back to, we talked about earlier how it's not a deficit of attention, right? At times you can hyper focus. So, have any of you here experienced that hyper focus where you get so hyper focused on one thing and then you suddenly find that you are no longer mentally flexible, that you're not able to really evaluate the pros and cons anymore because you are stuck on that one point. And so now you're stuck on fuel efficiency. So you go ahead and you purchase that car. But as you are driving off the lot, you immediately start to regret your decision because you realize you didn't give the car that you did not choose. You didn't really look at the pros of that car more in depth. And you realize now that that car was a lot more comfortable and it did really have the technology that suited your needs better. So we want to make certain that you have that mental flexibility so that you can evaluate alternatives. For individuals with ADHD, that cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift focus and evaluate different outcomes can be limited. This often results in either impulsive decisions or that analysis paralysis that we discussed earlier, where no decision gets made at all due to the overwhelming number of factors to consider. Now, number four, so we've looked at the attention, gathering information, that mental flexibility, and now it's time to make the decision. And when you make that final decision, it requires controlling what we just mentioned, that impulsivity or the procrastination, where you just avoid the whole decision-making process altogether and hope that it resolves itself. So let's look at another scenario. In this scenario, your lease is running out. You know you have to move out of your apartment in 2 weeks. So you spend some time and you set up some appointments. You go into different neighborhoods, you look at different apartments. You feel pretty good. You're evaluating your different options and you narrowed it down to, again, two bales of hay. But these bales of hay are different, right? So the one apartment is very small, but it is in a vibrant neighborhood. There are a lot of amenities, a lot of your favorite shops, a lot of your favorite restaurants are right in that neighborhood. So you're excited about the amenities that are close by, but the apartment itself is really small. Now, the other apartment is a little bit further away. It's not in a great neighborhood, but it's a large apartment and it has a lot more room to grow and to have your furniture and everything that you've packed in those boxes. It comes with enough space for all of that. And you'll just have to simply drive a little bit to get to some of the restaurants and shops that you enjoy. So you're looking at both of those options, and all of a sudden you get a bit overwhelmed by that decision-making process. So because you are overwhelmed and you don't really want to make the decision, you put that decision off. You start procrastinating because you're hoping, again, maybe this decision will just resolve itself. Someone will take one of the apartments and I'll have no choice, right? Someone makes the decision for me. So you put it off, you put it off, and suddenly you realize you only have 3 days left to your lease. You have to put a deposit down on a new apartment. You have to find a mover. You have to pack the rest of your items. You only have 3 days. So now, impulsively, because you've procrastinated for so long, you have to make a decision. You no longer evaluate and you impulsively decide to go with that apartment that is in the vibrant neighborhood. So you start moving all of your things in, and what do you think you found out? None of your things really fit. The bedroom is too small for the bed you own. You don't have enough room for all of your furniture. So you really should have taken the time to evaluate your different options better because although you have a great neighborhood, none of your furniture fits in this current apartment, and daily living isn't quite as comfortable. So it's important that you are able to make that decision and not make it impulsively and not also procrastinate. ADHD can cause impulsiveness, as we know, where decisions are made too quickly to avoid feeling overwhelmed. So you just want to get it all behind you, or procrastination, where the fear of making the wrong choice leads to inaction. This either results in regret over rushed decisions or missed opportunities due to delay. So these are bigger decisions that we're talking about here, not what should I wear in the morning? These are bigger decisions. And do any of these steps in the decision-making process, do they resonate with you? Have you yourself struggled in some of those areas? Okay, a lot of you are saying you have. Now, finally, once we make the decision, it is important that we take the time to reflect on the outcome. And this requires self monitoring. Now, remember, self monitoring is part of executive function. It's one of those mental processes within executive function. And that means that you're able to take the time to learn from past decisions. Because let's admit, we've all made bad decisions in the past, right? We've all made some bad decisions. But unless we take time afterwards, not to just feel regret, but to learn from those mistakes, we won't really be able to make better decisions in the future. We have to reflect on the outcomes so that we can evaluate what we did really well and we really need to improve. So, in our final decision making scenario here, we have that individual, and maybe this is you because I think someone here mentioned getting a new job. You're considering getting a new job. And so in this scenario, he has been offered a new job, and that job offer has a higher pay. So he's going to get a pay increase, which is really appealing. However, along with that pay increase, there's also longer hours and a longer commute. But the pay increase is really appealing. So he went ahead and he made the decision to take the higher pay job. So he gets into that job and he's reaping some of the benefits of more money, but he suddenly realizes that the payoff is not that great. It does not benefit him because now he does not have that work balance, that work-life balance, right? That now that he has this job, he didn't really consider how the longer hours and the longer commute was negatively affecting or was going to negatively affect his relationships because now he doesn't have any time for his family. He has less time to be with his friends. He doesn't have time to work out or to enjoy hobbies that he once enjoyed. So he really did not evaluate enough of that decision before making the decision on higher pay. He didn't balance it out. Now, this is a great opportunity to reflect and learn from the mistake he made. So, after you make a decision, whether it's a big decision or small decision, you need to take that time to self monitor so that you can learn from, again, what you did well and also what you did not do as well, what you could improve. And reflecting on the outcomes is always important. And this should be something that if you have a child who's struggling with ADHD or decision making, after a decision is made, even if it's a bad decision, you should model and take that time to work through reflection. Okay? ADHD can make it hard to pause and reflect on decisions, leading to repeated mistakes or dissatisfaction. So, taking the time to self monitor and reflect could help you and your children learn from your experience and make better decisions next time. So, when I say modeling, that's really important when we talk about modeling for our children or our clients or our students, because it's important for younger individuals to see, especially your children, because they are watching you, even though you think they're ignoring you, they are learning from you. And when they can see that, oh, mom made a mistake, but she's working through it. She's having this conversation with me and she's telling me what she's going to do differently next time. That's a really important learning process for your child. Okay. Um, Now, when we talk about the different areas of executive function, we know that executive function is now key in the decision-making process. So remember, we looked at that wheel of executive function and all of those mental processes, we've now broken that down. And you see how those mental processes are required for strong executive function. We need strong focus, attention, impulse control, working memory, cognitive flexibility, and self monitoring. All of those mental processes within executive function. So now we know how critical executive function is. And maybe some of you are thinking, I'm not really sure where my challenges lie. That might not be clear to you. Some of you know right away, working memory is my downfall. That is where I really have a hard time in the decision-making process. But some of you may be thinking, I don't know, is my attention really that scattered? Or is my working memory really a component that I need to look at? Or is it that mental flexibility that I've never really experienced, or maybe I've never really evaluated my mental flexibility? Or maybe you're looking at your child and you're thinking, well, is he really impulsive or is he just nine being nine, right? And so if you want to look a little bit deeper, because as we mentioned earlier, in order to take steps to improve, we have to have clearly defined where our challenges lie. So if you're not really clear on where your challenges lie, we do have a few different assessments available. And these may be areas you want to consider. One is our ADHD test online, and many of you here already may have already taken that test. When you do that questionnaire on our website, immediately it gives you an outline of the different cognitive skills that are weak for you now and which of those cognitive skills we can incorporate into your play attention program. And so that might be something that will give you a little bit of clarity. So if you want that ADHD test online, it's just a link that we can send to you. You can just type in test and we'll make certain that following this webinar, you receive that. You may have already taken it, especially if you're one of our current clients, you may have already taken that test. But it's a good way just to spend some time reflecting on the areas you'd like to improve because we want that clarity. Now, if you want a little bit more in-depth look, because that is just a simple questionnaire that asks you what you're experiencing on a day to day. Now, we do have a couple of other options for you. And one is called Focus. Focus is a norm reference test of attentional control. So it is a 20-minute test. It's a CPT, it's a continuous performance test. And we look at four different constructs of attention. So you have to respond to certain stimuli on the computer, and this is appropriate for children and adults. You have to respond to certain stimuli, and it takes 20 minutes, like I said. And at the end, we look at four different constructs. We look at attention, I'm sorry, four different constructs of attentional control. We look at consistency, performance, impulse control, and your ability to deal with distractions, both auditory and visual. So that focus assessment is an option for you as well. Then we also have the brief assessment, which is a behavior rating inventory of executive function. This is more subjective. It's a lengthy questionnaire, which will probably, again, take you about 15 minutes to fill out. But that gives us a snapshot of your executive function on a day-to-day basis. So we have that first ADHD test, which is very simple, just asks you a few questions and then it outlines some of the cognitive skills we can address within play attention. And then we have the focus and the brief. If you're interested in learning more about the focus and brief, because those are options, they are $50 a piece. But if you want a more in-depth look, and we do, if you take the focus or brief assessment, we do need about a 40-minute block of time afterwards for your feedback session, where we review the results with you more in depth and have that conversation. So you are certainly welcome to, Susan says, send all please. So you can say focus, brief, or all assessments, and that'll allow us to reach out to you and help you with those next steps if you're interested in more assessments. But like I said, some of you may have already gone through that assessment process and you have a clear understanding, a clear idea of where the challenges lie. So once we know where those challenges lie, we can start looking at some strategies so that you can be more efficient in your decision-making process. And hopefully, if you are more efficient, then you will have less stress in that process as well. So let's go ahead and I'm going to share with you some strategies. So we've looked at the decision-making process and why it is challenging. Now let's look at some strategies you can use in order to help with that process. And what I'm hoping is that you can walk away with at least one new strategy that you can incorporate into your day-to-day life. So first, I think this is one that we can all start with, but it is simplifying the choices. So if you develop routines and systems to minimize the number of decisions you have to make, that will allow you to free up some mental space. So I recommend this for some of those decisions you're making on a day-to-day basis that just seem to be taking up too much time. And we'll go back to that closet scenario. I forget who said they were standing in front of their closet for too much time and could not decide what to wear. And that is probably something that many of you have struggled with, or you also see your child struggle with that in the morning. And that was Larissa said that she spent way too much time standing in front of her closet, right? So why don't we, since we know we have to make that decision every single day, and that closet is indeed full of clothes, we should take that away from the morning routine because there's lots of things going on in the morning and put that in the night before. you have a little bit more time the night before. You won't feel as much pressure because it's not causing you to be late when you can't make that decision. So move that to the end of the day where you're making your plan for what to wear the next day, the previous night. Now, you can also look at this with meal planning because many of you brought up one of the struggles you had was, what am I going to eat? What am I going to cook? A lot of you wrote that down. And so meal planning is a great idea because if you are going to your lunch hour and you spend so much time just trying to decide what to eat, you lose that time to actually enjoy your lunch. So if you take some time on a Sunday night and just do a little bit of meal prepping, like you see here on the screen, you can just prep your meals so that decision is done. You have your 5 meals set out for the week, and now that decision is literally off your plate, right? You don't have to make that decision. So, doing anything possible to simplify your choices is a really great idea to simplify those choices. Now, another idea, another strategy is to set decision-making criteria. And the criteria will be different depending on if it's a small decision or if it's a larger decision, right? But if you establish clear criteria, it can make that process easier. So let's say it's a little decision. And it should not take you that long. It's something that you do every day. So set a timer to 5 minutes and say, I'm going to make this decision in 5 minutes. I'm going to give myself 5 minutes so that you don't procrastinate and just put something off that really doesn't need to be put off. It's a decision you can make. Now, if it's a bigger decision and it's going to take a little bit more evaluation, remember that information gathering stage can be overwhelming and it can negatively affect your working memory. So narrow it down to the top 3 criteria that you want to look at. So narrow down the criteria that you're going to evaluate when making your decision. Setting that decision making criteria can, again, make that process easier. Or you can consider creating decision-making routines. So that daily checklist, remember when we looked at that first slide and there were a million sticky notes, and a lot of you said, that's what my day looks like every single morning. But you know that there are a lot of things that repeat every single day. So instead of having all of those sticky notes with lots of different things that are competing for your attention, just think about what are maybe 3 to 5 tasks that happen every single day. And just put those in your to-do list, right? You know you need to wake up. don't don't hit the snooze button. You need to get up, maybe have breakfast, do your workout, answer emails, check your calendar. Those 5 things, those are going to be your standard operating procedure every single day. Once you get past those 5 things, you can start prioritizing the others. So have that routine in place so you alleviate some of the decision-making process. And it will also be a good idea to look at some decision-making templates because I don't know if you've researched this or done a Google search or an online search for decision-making templates or apps that can help you. So if you have a hard time deciding on the criteria that's most important, some of these decision-making templates or apps can really be helpful. And again, it will reduce that cognitive load. Shari says, I definitely need help with a reliable capture system. Yeah, and that's something that they are available to you, something that is an idea to really research. Now, you can also practice delayed gratification to manage impulsiveness, right? We don't want you to make impulsive decisions. So, although some decisions are very small, and we said you can set that timer for 5 minutes, make your decision within 5 minutes, others might need a little bit more time. So, let's say that it's a small decision, but it's an important one. Go ahead and set your timer to 10 minutes so that you can make that decision after 10 minutes. You've gathered some information, take 10 minutes, set that timer. Or maybe it's just take 10 breaths. Just do something. If you feel that impulsivity start to creep up on you, make certain you just take a moment to step back and then respond. Okay. Because if you have identified impulsivity as one of the challenges, then you really want to start setting in these delayed gratification points. And if it's a bigger decision, maybe you set 2, 3 days and create a larger buffer time, right? Because not every decision needs to be made right away and should not be made right away. You can think about when you're replying to a text message or an email, sometimes when the text message or the email is a little bit mm, difficult, right? Maybe you're not certain how you should respond. The answer is a little bit difficult for you. Or maybe you are emotionally tied to your response. Instead of just typing your response in a text message and an email and hitting send right away, take a moment, step back and take a moment. Okay. The fifth strategy you can look at is delegating decisions when possible. So a lot of times this can be challenging because you think that you're the only one that can make the right decision. But really step back and think there are other people on your team or maybe a family member or a friend who can help you make decisions or go ahead and make the decision. You don't have to make all of the decisions, right? So maybe you can actually delegate those decisions when possible. So call on a team member or a work colleague or a friend. Okay. So delegating is a great idea as well. So we've gone through some different scenarios, and KS says, will your slides be sent to us after? They're super helpful. And KS, I can certainly put the slides into a PDF so that you can refer to the slides later. And I will include that download we'll make certain we include that in the email that goes out tomorrow so that you'll have the recording and then also the slides to follow along. Okay? You're welcome. So now in summary, when we look at the different challenges in executive function, this does make it a little bit clearer about why the decision-making process can be so difficult for not only everyone, but especially for individuals with ADHD. And I hope clarity allows you to give yourself some grace, right? Because you should not be so down on yourself, right? We said one of those negative side effects can be that you feel a decreased self-esteem because you look at everyone else and you think, why is it so easy for everyone else? And just remember what we discussed today, that if executive function is challenged, then it makes it a little bit more difficult. But there are steps that we can take in order to improve that decision-making process. So I hope that you really think about those 5 different steps we talked about, things that you can take. And we also want to think about not only strategies. I always want you to have tips and strategies because those are important. I want you to have those in your toolbox. But at some point, we have to get to the root cause, right? We have to start developing those foundational cognitive skills that right now may be challenging, like sustained attention and impulse control and task completion, auditory processing, working memory, all of those foundational skills that we address within play attention so that we can develop cognitive skills and improve executive function. Remember, when we can improve those skills, improve executive function, then that decision-making process will be easier, and all of those strategies that we talked about today will also be easier. So if you want to learn more about play attention, I'm happy to meet with you and do a consultation, or one of our executive function coaches can meet with you and have that discussion. We also have an upcoming webinar, which is going to walk you through the play attention process. But just a quick little review of how we develop skills because we do the skill building in a really unique way. And I know that many of you here today are current clients, so you're familiar with this process. But for those of you who are not, you see on my screen in the graphic, he is wearing our body wave technology. Now, this is our NASA inspired technology. On the back, there are three sensors. And when I slide this armband on my arm, those sensors are now monitoring my brain activity that tells us how attentive I am. And remember, attention is that first critical component of decision making. Now we're going to actually be able to see your attentive state in real time. That body wave armband monitors your attention and then communicates it with the computer so that you're able to see your attention. You feel what you're doing, and you're allowed to practice not only attention, but all of those other cognitive skills that are required for executive function. All of the cognitive skills so that when we're looking at let's say we do an assessment and we pinpoint attention stamina, working memory, task completion, auditory processing, short-term memory, those are the cognitive skills we want to put into your plan. You can access those exercises, but they're all brain enabled, meaning you have to be paying attention in order to activate the exercise. If you're not paying attention, then the activity will stop or the character will go in the wrong direction, and you have to focus back in order to in order to activate the exercise. So that means in order to work on those critical skills, you have to be paying attention. And making that attention concrete and controllable is the first step to improving executive function. So if you would like to learn more, let's talk about some next steps. And a lot of you are writing in some great questions, and I am going to go back through these questions, but I do want to talk about some next steps for those of you who may need to leave the presentation a little bit earlier. So Antoinette says, thank you, Gwen. I have recognized so many of these steps in myself, and I realize that I need to work on it before I make more impulsive decisions that I regret or missed opportunities. That summarizes, Antoinette. It just summarizes what we've discussed today. So I'm glad you brought that up. I assume that play attention isn't for children, although it sounds like it, but older, undiagnosed adults can manage and also benefit. Absolutely, Antoinette. You know, it's really interesting because I've been using play attention with my clients for about 30 years, since 1996. And there's been a huge shift in our client base over the last 5 years. Our main group of clients are actually adults between the ages of 45 and 75. We know through neuroplasticity that it is never too late. So you are absolutely right, Antoinette, that the Play Attention program can be customized for both children and adults. And we can do that a variety of ways. And also, I want to mention Silver Minds because uh, I know Antoinette asked about age range and if it is appropriate for adults as well. And it is, as I mentioned, but in recognizing that, we know that we have so many individuals who are interested. They may have ADHD, like Antoinette said, undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. And you may have ADHD, or you may just be concerned about cognitive health and vitality. So, our new division, which is really exciting, is called Silver Minds. And we are incorporating all of the components required for cognitive health and vitality. So, in our Silver Minds division, and we're having a special webinar on Silver Minds next Tuesday. So if you want more information on Silver Minds, you can type in Silver Minds. But we're going to talk about our virtual bundle that we now have available, where you're not only going to use the customized plan with Play Attention, but we're also going to integrate all of the components we know are very important when we talk about cognitive health as we age. And that means we're going to incorporate community, mindfulness, light exercise and mobility, education, nutrition, All of those components are going to be incorporated into our virtual package of Silver Minds. So if you want more information on that, I would be happy to send that information to you as well. Like I said, we're doing discovery calls now if you want just a call, or we're having a webinar on that next week. So if you're looking at incorporating play attention into your practice, whether it is a school or a clinical practice, we can certainly have that conversation as well. And I can, or one of our executive function coaches can talk to you about incorporating it into your practice. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Have a great afternoon or evening, depending where you are on the planet.